Welcome to Plaid Perch Farm. I'm Greg Paget, the owner and operator of Plaid Perch Farm with my family. And I am excited that you're joining me today for a scouring tutorial. We're going to walk through how to scour raw fleece from sheep like this and turn it into an amazing skein of yarn like this. And there's so many more possibilities after that. So grab your fleece, grab some hot water, a bucket, and some detergent, and that's what we're gonna need to get started. So we're gonna work on making this a very accessible process to make sure that everybody can wash fleece, because if washing fleece is exciting and right for you, you'll really enjoy it, but you don't have to. But let's give it a shot. Let's try it, see if you like it, and if you don't, support those that do and buy fleeces, washed fleeces, or prepared fiber from those people that enjoy doing it. But if you enjoy it, do it yourself. So we're gonna walk through those simple steps. We're gonna prepare our fleece and our supplies, and then we're gonna go through some soaking, some washing, and then we're gonna talk about all the different pieces to finish this up. So I'm hoping to leave you with a great how-to step process on washing fleece, and then give you some great resources that you can dig deeper into this process and find the process that works for you, because there is no one way that works for everybody, and there's no right or wrong way. If you can get the finished product that you're looking for and you can do it in a safe, sustainable way, then you've done a great job. And there's many different fleece types, there's many different water types, and so you find the process and the tools that work best for you. And I hope I can help you along that journey of finding your joy in scouring wool.
Let's start with the first step of scouring our fleece, the preparing section. This is where we're going to inspect our fleece and gather our supplies.
Let's talk about the fleece that we're going to use today to scour for our example. So this is from our sheep Dory. She's a CVM. She's kind of a mix of different grays, but this is a 4-ounce pack from my shop that we're going to use as this example. So let's open it up, and then we're going to take out the fleece, put that down there. And this is when we're going to start to look through and inspect our fleece, see what we have, see what we need to remove, and see how we're going, what we have to wash. So our first step is we're going to pull a lock out, and we're going to grab the cut end and the tip end, and we're going to give it a tug. And we want to hear kind of a ping as you are pulling that, and you don't want to see it break apart. So that means you have a good strong staple. And this one is, so my middle finger is about 3 inches long. So if I can set the staple in there, we're looking at, let's see, about 3.5 inches. So a really nice staple length. And there is some variation through here, because if you look here, this is a little closer to 3 inches. So you'll have some variation. So now we know our lock is solid and we have a good strong lock. This tells me that I want to scour this fleece. If I have a break in it, I'm gonna have to consider if I'm going to wash this fleece or not. If it breaks in the middle and I have two small pieces, that's going to be too short to process, and so I will probably scrap the fleece. I'll turn it into compost or use it as mulch. If, for example, the tips are breaking off, then that's something that I might continue to scour, because that's something I can remove in processing. For example, I could hand comb these, and that would help remove those tips so it doesn't create neps and problems. Same thing if towards the cut end, like for example, some of my Shetlands, when they're going through the rise, when their fleece naturally breaks to shed off, that might be closer to the tip, depending on the time of shearing. And so that might come out in combing. But as long as I'm left with a good lock that is a good length that I can work with, then I feel like then I can move ahead with it. So then we're going to look through and see, are there any big chunks of VM that we want to remove? Like, for example, here we've got a big seed head. So let's get that out of there. let's look for some short ends or second cuts. And for example, we have kind of a second cut here. I don't know if you can see that very well, but that is basically when the shearer is shearing and they go over a pass that they've already gone over. That will create some second cuts, and so basically they're shorter and they'll cause some problems in your fleece because or in your processing because they'll want to nip up. Um, and here's a really great example of it. This here is just a really short lock. It's about a half inch because it was sheared twice. So you want to comb through and remove all of those things out of this fleece. Once you've looked through and gotten the things out that you want and you're left with the beautiful fleece that you want to wash, that's when you move to the next step. So the next step we're going to do is we can do a couple different directions. For today's example, what we're going to do is we're going to put the fleece into a mesh bag and then we'll wash the fleece this way. Now that we've got our fleece inspected, we need to make sure we have the supplies needed to be able to do the washing. So I want to go through the three basic supplies. I want to talk a little bit about the pieces that go with those. So our first one is our vessel. So we need something to wash our fleece in. I like to use these 3.5 gallon buckets. It's a good size, so I don't overfill it with water and I don't get it too, and it's pretty manageable. One of the things you need to consider when you're washing wool is you're going to be dumping a lot of water and it's going to be hot water. And so you want to make sure that you're in a place that is easy to do that. So disposing of the water is really important as well. So I set up outside because that allows me to dump the water outside and use the nutrients that this clean water now provides to my plants. So I actually have a hose that runs out to my pasture and I can pump everything out into the pasture and I can water the grass for the sheep to graze on out there. Other ways you can do it is you can throw it in a gravel driveway and that hot water is going to burn off any weeds. So it's like a natural weed killer. But you also want to make sure that anywhere you do dump it, it is really hot. So if you want to use it for plants and fertilizing, you want to let it cool down before you apply it to those plants. So those are some things to think about. I don't personally like to put it down my drain just because there's the lanolin is one thing because that's going to kind of re-solidify and I don't want that in my pipes and in my septic system because we're on a rural septic system here. Also, I don't want that gunk. There's a lot of hair and wool and just other foreign matters that go down. I don't want that stuck in my plumbing system. So keeping it outside for me works the best. So you need to find somewhere that you can dispose of the water easily in containers that are accessible to you. So you don't want anything that's going to be too heavy that you aren't able to move or dump in the manner that you want. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your vessel. The other thing you want to consider is, can it handle the temperature? So we're using hot water. That's our second ingredient. And hot water, we want it between 140 and 160 degrees. So we want a container that is going to be able to withstand that heat. So when you're choosing a bucket or you're choosing a pot, you want to make sure that it's one that can sustain that heat and not damage itself. And so I mentioned the pails that I use. You can also use like Rubbermaid tubs or some sort of like plastic tub. People will often use those. You, when I'm heating on my camp stove, I'll use this enamelware canning um, stock pot, and this works really well for heating water on the camp stove, and I don't have to worry about it damaging that fire damaging any of my pots, and they stay here for that. So I use it for scouring and dyeing. The other one I really like is stainless steel. And so if you have a stainless steel that you can dedicate to wool preparation, it really works well. The thing I love about stainless steel is it really retains the heat. So when you put that lid on, it's going to hold that heat for a long time. So I really like this sort of vessel. So if that's something that's accessible to you, that's a really great way to go also. So we've talked about the first item that you need for your supply list, and that's the vessel. That's what you're going to be doing the washing and scouring in. The second thing you need to consider is obtain is hot water, and that can be a challenge for certain places and setups. And so I'll walk through a couple different ways that you can do that yourself. So as I mentioned here, I have a camp stove. This is a 2 burner camp stove. You can get just a 1 burner, and this just runs on liquid propane. And I'm able to heat my water here. So I'm able to fill it from the hose and then heat that water to the temperature that I want, and then hold it at that temperature. So that works really well. And that's a way that I really started washing wool, was using this camp stove. The other way you can do it is straight from your tap. Some hot water heaters can heat up to 150-ish degrees. Mine can get up to about 155 if I turn it all the way up. And so often I will turn my water heater up when I'm planning to do some wool scouring, and I'll use that straight from the tap. And so that really makes it easy. It's a little more instant, and works really well. So I just have a hose that I hook up into the shower in the bathroom in our basement, and then I run it out through our patio door to the walkout here, and so then I have hot water access outside. Some people even have a hot water tap on the outside of their house. That would be a luxury, and someday that will be happen. Uh, so the other thing you want to consider with your hot water tap is you want to make sure that you're being safe with that hot water. So I often will do it when my kids are at school, or they're not home, so I can make sure that they're not going to get scalded when using the hot water and it being a hotter temperature than they're used to. And also letting them know when it is up and they need to be a little more cautious. Maybe it still hasn't come down in temperature. The other way you can do it is you can get the hottest water you can out of your tap, and if it doesn't reach that 150 to 160 or 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, you can raise that temperature by adding boiling water. That's another really great way that you can kind of heat water, but not have to heat a whole lot of water to bring that temperature up. And lastly, another method you can use is an immersion bucket heater. They are slow to heat, but they are efficient and they can get really hot. The one that I have, I bought it to experiment with scouring, found that it took a long time to heat each of my containers up to that appropriate temperature. And so now I mostly use it just to reheat or to heat my indigo vat as I'm creating or reviving a vat. And the last supply that we really need out of those 3 basics is a detergent. For today, we're going to be using Unicorn Power Scour, but there are a whole number of different scouring agents that you can use, and use what works best for you. I found that the Power Scour is one that works really well with the fleeces I'm washing, with the water type that I have, and it gives me the result that I'm looking for. So I use that. Find the one that works best for you. And so you might want to experiment with different scouring agents to find which one is the right combination for the fleece that you have, the water type that you have, and so forth. Um, Fossil Fibers blog has a really great post that Longdraw James and Corey from Fossil Fibers put together about scouring agents, really analyzing those from a scientific standpoint. And that folds into their percentage method of scouring. And so now that we've talked about detergents, let's talk about how much detergent we want to use. I'm going to refer to that blog post on Fossil Fibers website because it's incredible. It really helped simplify my process. So I want to share that with you because I think they put a lot of really hard work into that, and it really creates some really great results. You'll see that I have my kids' dry erase board that I use to track my washes. And so I'm going to walk through how I do this. So the first thing that I do is I figure out how much weight in raw fleece I have. And so with this 4 ounce pack that we're going to wash through this video, it's about 115 grams. I convert to grams because then it allows me to easily convert to milliliters, and I can use my measuring cup to determine or to measure out that close to that precise amount. So with 115 grams, when we when we take that times the 5% wash, that we get about 5.75 milliliters. So I'll use about five because that's an easy measurement on my measuring cup. So we'll do a number of washes that way. And then in this example, you'll see that I ended up doing two washes at 5%. Then it went to 3%. So that calculates out to about 3.5% milliliters. And so I just kind of estimated that using the drop or the measuring cup. And then I did two washes at the 3%. And then so I felt like I had a really good clean. And so then I moved to rinsing. I did two rinses and felt like I really got some good clear water, and the fleece looked like it felt really well. So that's how you use the percentage method. The other things that you could add to this are things such as a thermometer, some heavy duty gloves to help protect your hands as you're working with the hot water. I like to use mesh laundry bags to wash my fleeces in. So you'll see those throughout our demonstration. And something to push down the fleece, like you can use a wooden spoon or a potato masher, something of that sort is usually pretty helpful. I like to use Tyvek wristbands, the disposable wristbands that you might find at a festival or a kids event, to write down what I'm washing, and so I can keep that label attached to the bag as I'm washing it, and then I can attach it or keep it with the dry fleece once it's stored. So that helps me keep track of things. When scouring fleece, there's some really important tips that you want to keep in mind as you're going through this process. So in this section, I want to cover the three things that you should really consider when washing fleece. And one is temperature. The next is extracting the water. And lastly, we're going to talk about how to look at your water samples to see when it's time to move to the next step of the washing and rinsing process. Temperature is a really important key factor to consider when you are washing wool. The ideal temperature you want to wash and rinse your wool is between 140 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, the lanolin will liquefy and melt off of the fleece. If you drop below the 140, you'll start to re-solidify that lanolin back onto your fleece. So keep that in mind. You also don't want to make a lot of drastic temperature changes. You don't want to go from cold water to hot water or hot water to cold water, because that's going to cause some unnecessary felting. Extracting your water from your fleece is a really important or a really important step to go through in your scouring process. So I want to show you a couple different ways that you can do so. And this is again why I really enjoy the laundry bags, because they hold this together, and then I can take it and I can just compress and just squeeze that water out. I'm not wringing it, I'm just squeezing it out. So that is one way that you can remove that water. The other way, if that is a method that isn't going to work well for you, is you can press it against the side of your basin or your sink and squeeze the water out that way. So extracting the water in between washes and rinses helps you start with a really fresh batch on the next wash or rinse that you move to. Another way to extract water is using a spin dryer. This is just a small clothing spin dryer. It has about a 22-pound capacity. And what I'll do is I'll place my fleeces in the bags, I'm gonna even them out, and give that just a few minutes to spin, and that helps extract that water out. And I really like this at the end of on my very last rinse, because it really extracts a lot of the water and allows a very minimal drying time, because I've squeezed most of that water out at that point. So put that cover on, and then we'll activate it. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to balance out. And then we have a ton of water that's starting to pull right out of there. And this is also a great way to see what is that water color that's coming out of there looking like. Let's look at our water samples, because our water samples are a really good visual to see when we're ready to move on to the next step of washing. You can see here we have the full array of the samples from the hot soak all the way to the final rinse. And this will show the progression of what the water should look like as you go through. So when we go from a hot soak to the first wash, you'll see the hot soak is really dirty, really dark brown water. That's perfectly normal. That's getting a lot of that dirt out, and we haven't added detergent yet, so we're not really extracting much of the lanolin. When you look at the first wash, which was at 5% of detergent, you'll see that we're starting to get a little more cloudy. We've got a lot of the dirt out. Now we're starting to really focus on the lanolin. And as you go through, you'll see it becoming less and less cloudy. And you'll see on our second wash at 5%, it's less cloudy than the first one, which is ideal. And so at that point, I've decided let's reduce our detergent to 3%. So in the 3% wash, you'll see it's even less cloudy. And so we're starting to get pretty clean. So then I moved to doing a hot rinse, and that hot rinse came out pretty clear. I probably would have stopped here, but because I was doing a demo, I continued because I had the hot water ready. So that is the progression that your water will take as you're working through your washing each of those different baths. So again, watch each of those. That's going to help you determine, am I ready to reduce my detergent? Am I ready to move to a rinse? So the first step to washing our fleece is considering if we want to soak our fleece or not. There are three options you can consider when you're considering soaking your fleece. You can do a cold soak, which you submerge your fleece into cold water and let it set, ideally overnight, up to 24 hours, and then proceed to the hot wash from there. The other option is to do a hot soak. You could do 1 or 2 hot soaks before you go into adding detergent and doing a hot wash. And so this would be submersing the fleece in water at the temperature between 140 and 160 degrees, because that will help loosen the dirt and also start to activate and melt that lanolin off. And the other option is to just move straight into the hot wash and not do any sort of soaking. And so pick the option that works best for you. Maybe experiment with these different options and see what gets the results that you are seeking as you are washing your fleeces. So then the next step is our hot wash. And this is where we're going to add detergent. And so we want to keep in mind that we want to keep our water at between 140 and 160 degrees. The amount of detergent that we use is going to be indicated by the fleece, by the dirt level, by the amount of lanolin. So we're going to want to look at our water samples in between each of our washes to decide when we're ready to move on to the next step. So the first part you're going to do is you're going to take your hot water. So you've got your container and you've got your hot water. We've talked about some different ways you can heat your water. So at this point, you're going to want to have your hot water. You're going to add your detergent. So ideally, I start at a 5% wash or a 5% detergent to the dry weight of the raw fleece. And then I'll add that detergent after I've added the water. So I'm not agitating that water and building suds. And then I'll submerge my fleece into the water and I'll let that soak for 15 to 20 minutes. You want to remember not to agitate, but you can kind of push down and kind of work that fleece in that way, where you're just pressing it down into the water and moving the water and detergent through the fleece. So after that 15 to 20 minute soak time, you want to remove the fleece. This is where you'll want to do some sort of extraction. So you might be just squeezing the water out. You might want to use a spin dryer. There's a lot of different options where you can go. So look at the extracting section to determine how you want to extract that water. And then look at your water sample and determine what's the next step I'm ready to move on to. So I typically will do 2 to 3 washes at the 5% detergent level, and then I'll move I'll reduce that detergent to 3%, and I'll do 1 to 3 washes that way. And once I've gotten to a point where my water is starting to look clear and I'm ready to just really focus on rinsing and getting any sort of soap residue out of the fleece, then I'll move to my rinses and do 1 to 3 rinses. Remember, each of these is using hot water, again between 140 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and you just have to look at each of these steps and see, when am I ready to move on. And so this is where some experimenting and some experience can help you determine the most efficient way for you to wash your fleeces.
The hard part is done. Now we are on to step 3, the finishing. Let's dry our fleece and get it stored.
All right, I can hear you on the other side saying, Greg, how do I know that this fleece is clean? How do I know I am ready to be done with this fleece so I can move on and create something beautiful out of it? Well, let me show you a couple ways you can find out by actually looking at your fleece. So once it's dry, you can feel it, and if it feels soft and fluffy and like something you would spin, you did a great job. You got it out. If it feels kind of tacky or sticky, you might have some lanolin left in there, and that's okay. If you have some lanolin left, rewash it. I had that with a fleece that one of my first fleeces that I washed, the full fleece. Really excited, and I ended up hand combing it all, and then I spun half of it into a contrast color for a sweater I made for my husband, and it was great. It was really lovely. But then here recently, I was looking at the other half, and I wanted to use that in a blending. I wanted to blend it into a project, so I was going to put it through the drum carder, and I started feeling, I'm like, God, I didn't get this very clean. Like, there's still a little bit of lanolin left in there, still kind of tacky, and I didn't want to run that through my drum carder and gunk up my drum carder. So I ran it through. I think I did 1 or 2% of detergent to the weight of the fiber, and then did a couple hot rinses, and it was done. It was ready, and so I was able to get the rest of that lanolin out, and that was 2 or 3 years later. So it's totally possible. The other way you can do is smell a raw fleece, and you can kind of smell that lanolin. It kind of has a unique smell. Or then smell your fleece, and it smells clean. You won't smell that lanolin smell in there. So those are a couple different ways you can look at your fleece and see, did I get it clean? Now it is time to move on to the next step. At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to store our fleece. So we're going to make sure it's really dry, because if you put a damp fleece away, it's going to start to mildew and smell funny. So you don't want to do that. So feel like our fleece is good and dry here. We spun it out so it got a lot of that water out, and then we laid it out on the screen. There's a couple different options you can do when you're drying. I have just this plastic chicken wire that I laid out between. I just made a PVC pipe frame, and I have different layers that I can build up, and so I can dry a lot at once. You can also use window screens. Inside, I have some window screens that are set up that I can um, have them drying inside. So it's always nice to have that option. If the weather isn't so good, I can dry inside, or if I'm doing it in the winter, I use that a lot for when I'm dyeing. I'll dry them inside. And then the other option, you can do a window screen outside. You can set it on the ground. You could set it anytime you can get air on both sides is definitely ideal. So if you can elevate that, maybe set it on a couple buckets, that is going to help elevate it so you can dry it out. You can set them on a towel and dry them that way. Like, there's a lot of different options that you can do to dry your fleece. So just find what works for you. Look first at what you have and see if you can find some different options with the things you already have in your home, and you can use it that way. So now we're going to take this fleece, now that it's dry and we've decided it's ready to store. I like to store them in just a paper sack, because it holds it really well. And if I have I'll usually use my Tyvek tag, and I'll stick it in there. And so that will let me know what that fleece is that I washed, And so when I come back to it, I know what is in this bag. And so then I'll just put this inside, and I can put it in a tub. I can put it on a shelf. Like, I have a lot of different options of how I can store this. So this is one way to store it. You can put it in a plastic bag. It's totally an option, if that's an option that works best for you. You can also put them in a pillow sack. I got a whole tub of old pillow sacks that I've acquired over the years from just as we've changed sheet sets and so forth, or I've gotten from different thrift stores like Goodwill or Salvation Army, and you can store them in those as a really good way. So I like to, at this point, then move it inside. I don't like to dry overnight because I don't want the risk of any moths getting or any bugs getting into my fleece while it's drying overnight. So I try to move them inside to dry at night if they aren't quite dry yet by the end of the day, and then move them back out. Okay, we've done it. We've gone through all the basics of scouring wool. So now it's your turn. So grab your fleece, grab your hot water, your bucket, and your detergent, and get started. Just do it. Just jump in and see how you like it. See what you like, see what you don't like, and experiment, because there are so many different variables to washing wool that it takes time to learn and experiment with what is working and what is not working. So wash your wool, celebrate when you're done, because it's a huge accomplishment, and then you're really going to be able to make something beautiful that you're going to have for a long time that's really special to you. After watching this video, and if you want to learn more, check out my website where you can find a blog post with more resources available from others that have gone through and experimented and done research, and you can learn from them as well. So I'll have a link to those down below, and I'll also have a link to a downloadable step-by-step guide to help you walk through this process and include some of the tips and the supplies, the things that you need to get started. So check that out, and I hope to see you soon as we continue this fiber journey.